basic observation is that the mere existence of security alliances causes neighboring states to become hostile. First, all great powers have a historical fear of encirclement and isolation, and they view security alliances that arise around them as a plot to weaken it. Second, countries often want spheres of influence or buffer zones, and they see the expansion of alliances as intrusions into their backyard. This is a huge concern, especially if these countries have been invaded before. Take Russia and NATO. For decades, Russia said that it viewed the expansion of NATO as an intrusion. Remember that NATO was founded as an anti-Soviet defense pact, and yet, after the collapse of the USSR, NATO didn't just stick around. It expanded all the way to the Russian border. What are the harms that result from this hostility? First, most obviously, you attack countries when they're about to join these, what you see as a hostile alliance. To stop them from joining the alliance, in order to do so, you must attack them. So when Ukraine said it wanted to join NATO in 2019, it was completely foreseeable that Russia would have invaded. Second of all, after countries join the alliance, use gray zone tactics that weaken them if you see them as an enemy. This doesn't trigger Article 5. You don't need to invade. These tactics look like massive cyber attacks, like when Russia used DDoS attacks to bring the governments of Estonia and Romania to their knees. It looks like fake news campaigns to promote pro-Russian, far-right politicians like the ones winning in Hungary, in Germany, and Romania. It looks like building the Nord Stream pipeline to ensure that Europe became dependent on Russian oil. Alliances are bad at responding to these gradualistic tactics because the hostile countries is just pushing a bit more each time, and there's no clear threshold when you can actually mount a real response. Before I move on to my second argument, I'll take a POI.
The Russia-Ukraine argument happened because of a bilateral agreement, not because of RSAs.
No, Judge, I want to make this crystal clear. The reason that Russia wanted to invade Ukraine in the very first place is because it's threatened to join NATO, and in this case, by definition, is an alliance system. Now moving on to my second argument on unreliability. There's a vicious collective action problem that plague these regional defense alliances. When you invest in the military, everyone in the alliance benefits from that, but you uniquely have to bear the cost. The costs are internalized, but the benefits are externalized for everyone. This means that every individual member has an incentive to become a free rider because they want to benefit without putting in the effort. Two huge problems with this. First, nations severely underinvest in defense. Only 30% of Europe's 128 jets can actually fly. Spain spends more on bullfighting subsidies than its military. Italy claims to have 200 tanks, but when they tested them, only 50 could move. This isn't military investment. It's military cosplay. It's embarrassing, and it's the result of reliance. The second problem then, because of this free-riding regional alliance are fragile, those who spend the most will always feel like they're being taken advantage of and are likely to pull out. They can't justify to their voters where they're subsidizing other countries' laziness. And even if they don't pull out, they may just refuse to help if you ask for help. Judge, a treaty is just a piece of paper unless you actually have the political will to follow through. Do you really think the US would go to war with Russia, with Latvia? The upshot is this. You entice nations to put their faith in this regional alliance. But in the same breath, you make this alliance incredibly weak. This means when real crisis arrives, they're often left defenseless. What's the comparative side proposition? We get to exist in a sweet spot, where regional alliances give you some benefits of coordination and intelligence sharing, but you don't rely, Judge, as the motion says, on them and neglect your own self-defense. So long as you do so, even small nations can repel much larger invaders for a couple of reasons. One, small nations still have lots of options. There's intelligence sharing and bilateral security pacts that don't suffer from collective action problems. Even with no agreements, countries can still coordinate. Ukraine had received 150 billion euros of funding from Europe, even though it had zero alliances with them. Two, let's be really generous and assume none of these things works. Even if a bigger neighbor has the capacity to take over a smaller nation, it often lacks the political will to fully commit. If, and only if, that smaller nation has invested in its own military. The point is not that the smaller nation can win or anything, it's that it can impose a political cost using its military and makes war not worth it. Three, taking a country over is inherently really difficult. You need to control vast territory and deal with asymmetric warfare and armed insurgencies. Modern military are not equipped to fight when the country has the resources to arm its citizens and every civilian on the ground turns against you. These last two factors are why the US, I'm sorry to say this to y'all, comprehensively lost in Vietnam. It's also why Israel survived in 1948, despite being invaded by Egypt, Transjordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. They had a committed population technology. Even this means that multiple countries have now developed their individual militaries, we think they're still better for one single reason.